we want to chuck it back to our friends in Toronto and go to them to see if they have a first question for us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Priya Pandya, and my question is, what health and food safety regulations prevent large chain grocery stores from allowing customers to bring in their own reusable containers at the deli counter, the cheese counter, the salad bar, and the bulk bins?
That probably goes to you, Scott.
Thank you. What I can tell you is I know that there are some regulations in place. What I can't tell you, Priya, is exactly what they are. I mean, that is something that sort of would fall to our food safety people. And I know as a company, Sobeys takes food safety very seriously. I think part of the challenge, though, is ensuring that those containers are sterile and clean when they come in, and so that there's no danger or no chance of cross-contamination as people start to load bulk foods back and forth between the containers they bring in and between the bulk products that may be on shelf. But it's a good question. Thank you.
Thanks. And maybe I'll go to talk. Does Campbell's do bulk soup sales through grocery stores, or is it all cans and Tetris packs and that sort of thing?
I mean, we do have food service that we sell through. I mean, that would be the bulk business that's going there in their hot areas. But ultimately, we work on campaigns mostly on our retail soups or canned soups through Help Hunger Disappear and projects like that, and then through donations to the food bank, which is, like I said, 3 doors down. So,
Sound's cutting out.
is my sound on?
Okay, we'll get that figured out.
Well, I've seen those great big Campbell soup cans on the shelf.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we got some 48 ounce in there.
So one of the questions we have is, Canada lacks good quality data on household food waste. What can the National Zero Waste Council do to coordinate data gathering efforts nationally?
Well, that's a really good question. Why don't you answer it, seeing how you formed the council in many ways? Well, I guess we really are trying to be a clearinghouse. The National Zero Waste Council isn't trying to reinvent the wheel. My favorite term is, don't reinvent the wheel if you just want to go down a different road. So it can help in gathering information. We do work with local governments, and local governments are the sounding board for our citizens. So there's a way that we can probably gather information from our communities and funnel it through the Zero Waste Council.
And we did see that from Toine in Europe, where they had that map of different colored countries of who's doing a better job and not as good a job. Yeah, is there anything in the U.S. that's going on around nationally gathering data?
Yeah, so the reason that we're doing our city food level assessment at the city level is that cities often are the ones who make decisions around waste. They're often the ones that pay for the infrastructure and therefore make decisions around where waste is directed. And so cities are the ones who are really invested in having those numbers, and that's really an important level at which we want to gather these kinds of data. So our project is really meant to provide a template that other cities can use that's going to be very transparent, that we hope provides some level of calculator or easy way to access. And so we're hoping that this system, which is based on similar assessments, including one done here in Vancouver, as well as one done in the UK by WRAP, provide consistent metrics that can be used by a lot of folks to really measure and get a handle on what's being wasted.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the challenges that I've observed over time is, whether we're talking about diversion rates of your garbage into recycling or green waste, or is the methodology used? And you have to really, sorry the pun, but peel that back to try to figure out if you're comparing, here's another one, apples to apples. Sorry about that. Anyways, so the next question we have up there is, how can we protect organizations who want to donate large amounts of food waste after events or from grocery stores, or Campbell's, you gave a great example of what you're doing already, but how can we protect them about the concerns about liability of sending meats and dairy and other things to be donated safely? So is there barriers that you're facing from a sort of a legal and a food protection
Make sure this is working. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I mean, we've tried to partner with Second Harvest in doing that. And like Scott said, food safety is paramount. So that kind of limits what we can do in that regard. But we're constantly working to get through that and talking as a global corporation how best we can manage that. Because when we're looking at and designing soups, we go through a lot. Looking through the process just in our back in the lab, and we hate having to throw stuff out, but safety-wise, there's limitations of what we can do, and And once we've dipped into it and tasted it, there's limitations. So we collaboratively have to get together and figure out how do we manage that and do it safely and efficiently. So it is getting out and leverage organizations like Second Harvest who do have the infrastructure to get it where it needs to go as quickly as possible. So food safety is not compromised.
Right.
I would also just quickly note that in the U.S., there's federal legislation called the Bill Emerson Act, which protects donors against liability with reference to donation. And so that's the type of law that I think people need to hear about when they're under that sort of protection. And we're working with health inspectors, looking for the opportunity to train health inspectors to, as part of their inspections, provide information on safe donation and provide information on those kinds of regulations.
Yeah. And we do actually have that in the Good Samaritan Act in Canada as well that allows us to do that.
Okay. Scott, looks like you wanted to add something to that conversation.
Yeah, and so, well, first I want to come back to the question that was before this one in terms of understanding food waste at the residential level. Professor Mike von Maslow at the University of Guelph did a lot of great work in terms of individual studies over a 2-year period in the city of Guelph, where they actually pulled apart people's garbage and looked for organics in it. So if you're interested in finding out more about what's happened at the residential level, he's got some really good work there that shows what's happened at that level. Coming back to the comment earlier, though, in terms of donating product, I think one of the things that we need to work on collectively in this room is to make sure that food banks, have the facilities in place, have the infrastructure in place to be able to donate those products. A lot of food banks across Canada, and Sobeys donates literally hundreds of thousands of kilograms of food every year. It's a mixed bag in terms of which ones have refrigeration facilities or freezer facilities in place. So if we can add to the infrastructure or enable, that would certainly go a long way to increasing the food donations of perishable products.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to go to Toine and ask him a question that we have here. Someone asked, I heard France is passing a law to ban disposable dishwasher cutlery nationally. Maybe you can comment on that, and we'll go from there. Toine?
Yes. Great, and to be honest, France has passed this law, and it has been proposed for the second time and now being adopted. It's a complete set of acts. I think there are 60 different ones, but those that got the most attention is banning retailers preventing them to waste their food in containers. So it's promoting the donation, and there's also a penalty behind it. There's two main drivers in France if you look at it. There's two different politicians who fought for this act, and one is really driven from the right to food, and the other, and I think that's a good driver because it's a morally wrong thing, is that you waste food. And the other thing that was happened is just by as a reason that some retailers have practices that they bleach the food in the containers, and that's seen as also as a moral crime. So these two things came together as an act, and of course you cannot be against it. But if you look basically at how can you control, how can you manage it, and how can you implement such an act, that's really a difficult question also for the retailers, and not only for the retailers, but also for the accepting donation programs. What happened during the year that the law was further under discussions, the retailers sat together with organizations to come up with a better proposal. But because there was so much political emotion behind it, still this law was being accepted. But at the moment it looks like not anybody is really happy with this specific aspect of the law, because there's probably better collaborative solutions than what has been proposed and accepted and adopted here. So we will look very carefully about how this will evolve in time. But it is definitely not, it causes a lot of fuss around Europe, and it gives a lot of pressure to get people on the table to act and to promote, donate, but do the things that work in a special national context. Also, there's a lot of discussion in Europe on the Samaritan Food Act. To be open, there's only one country, Italy, that has this act in place. And other countries have found other solutions. And the more you go up north, they found more practices that better meet to how to professionalize food banks. That's already been mentioned as an important way. Make sure that they have the right facilities, the protocols. And what we see now, if you become a member of the national food bank in the Netherlands, you'll be secured. So there's an insurance company that has agreed on a contract with these companies. So if you are certified, you have no liability issue at all because it's covered by an insurance company. So there's other ways to handle this, but the most important aspect has already been addressed. Look for a professional way, look for professional models, because companies like to do business with trustful, responsible, professional organizations. And if they do so, the amount of food being donated increases enormously. We see that happening in many of European countries at the moment.
Excellent. Thank you for answering more than one question. That was great. I'm going to ask one last question, and maybe we can get all of our panel and Toine to answer as well. What is the largest logistical barrier to overcome in order to distribute edible food waste? So what's the one thing, if we could change something and we had a magic wand, what would we change so that we could have the most profound effect here?
Well, let me jump in there.
Why don't you jump in?
I'm not in the industry, but I would think storage is it. Because if you've got food, an abundance of food that you want to get, how are you going to store it and keep it safe? So that would be a big one. I don't know about freezing or freeze drying or any of those technologies that could be employed, but you need to somehow hold that food in a healthy, nutritious state so that it can be transported to where it's going to feed mouths.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. And in addition to storage, sometimes there are issues of timing. Sometimes you've got a huge event, it winds up at midnight. Who's accepting food donations at midnight? So figuring out not just storage, but where that can happen and who can transport it, and finding there are so many opportunities for new solutions with apps that can connect generators and recipients and so forth. So figuring out those processes of getting it from the place where it's generated to the place where it's needed.
Excellent. John?
Yeah, so on top of that would be engagement by whoever is doing it to ensure that the proper protocols are in place, that they're following that, so food safety is, handled appropriately. And then once again, using technology to get with all the sharing community that we've got out there now, and the available use of technology is getting that information out so we can get it to where it needs to go as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Scott?
Yeah, so there's not much more I can add in terms of the answers that I've already given. This is a problem that's been around for a while and is fairly well known and well understood. But it is about increasing the infrastructure, and some of what Darby said. I've seen some great work going on right now with apps where people are looking to do that exact thing, where they're looking to get people who are generating food waste tied together with people who are running food recovery agencies. And so I've seen a lot of good work going on there.
Excellent. Thanks, Scott. And Toine, do you have one last comment there on what's one thing that we could do to enhance what we're trying to do with food?
I think an important thing to add is there's easy way to extend shelf life, for example, with looking at the food waste factory to give you more room to act. And what we definitely see has already been mentioned is very driving a lot more is ICT tools enabling to match supply and demand. And that's a model that's being growing very rapidly in Europe in a successful way. On small scale, so also consumer to consumer, but mostly on business level, business to business, supporting the circular economy, because what someone considers as a loss or a side stream can be an important resource for another business. So we see that growing very rapidly at the moment.
Excellent. Thanks, Toine, and thanks to our panel here for having a good discussion here about food waste and things that we can actually do to move this agenda forward. So let's give them a big round of applause. Thanks, Scott.